our special grouping of the Board of Ed. Like Brigadoon, we can only meet them on the magic 5th week of the month at this time. So we appreciate our members who will be available to us. So Lauren, do you want to put the sessions up in the screen share like we did last time? I thought that was a pretty good way to do it. We'll continue this 15-minute session this time, and then next time, and then we'll do just a couple of big bulk sessions because I thought we generated a lot of questions and a small amount of text, which was fun actually. So
yeah, we're gonna have some interesting. Learn a lot.
Yeah.
So on the left-hand side is that analysis document that I provided at the beginning. And I'll get us down to article. Do you want to start with 2 or 3? See where we ended up. On the right-hand side is last week's draft with the notes that you made last week. So we left off kind of, I guess, article 2 talking about the terminology used here in the form of government, legislative branch. I don't know if we want to kind of pause on that conversation until we get into a more in-depth review, or if you want to go over anything else in article 2 before moving on to article 3. Joe, I can see your mouth moving, but I can't hear you.
Why don't we do the scroll down? Thank you. The joke is always that when we can all be together, you know, we're gonna have to start just randomly yelling at people that they're on mute. Why don't we start at just the scroll down through Article 2 and see if there are any other questions we have. I think particularly since Joan and Noreen aren't here yet, that they're probably most familiar with this section. So I think that that's a pretty good use of our time.
You want to start with the title again?
Bob, I'm thinking that might engender itself to our longer conversations. Because in 15 minutes, I think we can torch the entire 15 on the title. I don't want to lose the title. I'm just thinking that why don't we pick that one up when we do the longer sessions, if that's okay.
Well, just to throw something out, you know, what sticks out to me is it's 2.1.2, the publication of notice of town meetings. I just don't know if this is up to date anymore. You know, we're posting in the paper 10 days before, but I mean, just because of the attendance rate that we're having, I don't know if this is relevant. And if we should think about, you know, town paper and a different platform, the town website, something like that. But I just don't know if this is the right way.
To suggest that exactly that and the issue above it for the number of people, I look at those as kind of the same issue. You know what I mean? Like, what does it mean to engage the public? How many of the public should be there, and how do we talk to them?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I agree with you. Now, Lauren, do I remember correctly that we must use the papers? Noreen was saying that last time.
So here, if you look on the left-hand side, the State of Connecticut Chapter 99, Section 7-3 says that we have to put it in at least 5 days in advance. So we mandate in the charter at least 10 days in advance. And the state does say it has to be in a paper having general circulation, which they kind of describe as free circulation. So since the source is free and the New Haven Register is not, it has to go in the source. So we could change this to 5 days and follow the state, and then also include language about the website, which you'll see the notes here that I left you, that the 2015 commission did include language that said that publication had to be in the newspaper and on the website.
So this brings up a question for me. To what extent should we be specific? To what extent should we say consistent with state statute?
Yeah.
Because I have to believe in the next decade that every town is going to want to loosen this up, because it doesn't make sense.
Hopefully.
So I don't know, you know, so I guess not every issue fits that way, but, you know, what about just, you know, pointing to the state statute, and we're doing that, and then bring up, I think Matt's, you know, the other point, like, so we write state statute, great. That means we're compliant. And then, you know, Matt, to your other point, then what should we actually have the charter do? Like, how do we make sure that the you know, the virtuous or the scarless that come in town government, you know, follow the charter to communicate with the populace? Like, how would we want to talk about that? Does that state your issue, Matt?
We really need a discussion of the whole idea of the town meeting. So Matt brought up something earlier of, I mean, even I'd go back to section 2.1, which I think is not accurate the way we behave. The legislative body of the town is not the town meeting. It's the Board of Selectmen. There is the town meeting has a role often, but not often, since it rarely, in fact, it has a role, actually. How many of the ordinance currently on the books were proposed and enacted by the town meeting? Is the percentage 60%? 2%? I mean, come on, it's...
Bob, the point is, so if I'm correct, the point you're trying to make is, even though it's a town government or town meeting form of government, in actuality, because we don't hit a quorum, it's not.
And even if we had a quorum, it still wouldn't be, because all of the work of legislating, of the working it out, the hearings, the legal review, is not done at the town meeting.
Well, I think there are two things. I mean, as a I believe it's a matter of accuracy, and part of the, you know, Bob, when Ira comes back to talk with us from Bircham, Moses, and Devlin, we should talk with him about this too, to find out what trends, how other towns are describing this, because I think as a technical, the legislative body is actually the town meeting. They're the ones that's defined by statute. We can't enact, you know, each ordinance, if I recall, and then Lauren, I may be rusty, but if I recall correctly, has to then go back to the town meeting. So they are executing they're triggering it to them. Am I right on this, Lauren?
That wasn't my read earlier, but I may well be totally wrong about that.
Oh, sorry. No, your Board of Selectmen may enact ordinance provided under 10.1.a, and let's go take a shot down there.
Yep.
For a 4-member. Oh, yeah.
So
yeah, they can't. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, it is through the Board of Selectmen, but with a public hearing to the public for comment.
Right.
So it's not to a town meeting for an ordinance, but it is to a town meeting on any other financial vote, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so ordinances, right, we have a public hearing. I'm not opposed, by the way, give me about 25 seconds. One thing is that, I mean, I'm not somebody who wants to disempower the public, quite the opposite. I think we should be realistic and figure out institutional ways of doing it where it really happens, and also where we don't make the town vulnerable as it is now to a small group of extremists who raise hell at meetings. So that's, I think, is our challenge. And my other 2 cents is that this town is called Madison, right? What would Madison think of the town meeting? I mean, I can tell you what the answer is, at least from my reading. Anyway, he wouldn't think it's a very good idea, I'll put it that way. But, so I think I don't want to go into all these things about putting a Band-Aid on something that really needs to be rethought. And the vulnerability thing, I think, is serious. Anyway, we can.
So, I think. No, I think you're bringing. I think all these issues are very much related, right? So what we call it may not be, may not be in as much discretion as we think, but it does go to the idea of, should this charter make a change to what constitutes a town meeting, right? 2.1.1, and how we talk about it. And I don't want to forget in 2.1.3, Nancy's suggestion that when we do have a town meeting, that we no longer put the Board of Selectmen in a position to having to go hunt for moderators. Otherwise, end up with some jokers like me. Instead, we give them a pre-approved group so they can work that out. I mean, but that strikes me as more technical. I mean, Joan, we have just a couple minutes before we open to the public hearing. Do you have thoughts on both so one thing we talked about just before you joined was that when it comes to publication, Matt had brought up the point of putting it in the newspaper seems quaint, but we talked about the idea of just referencing state statute. Whatever state statute says, we'll do it, and if they change it. But then the question is what additional items we should do, and we have this issue on 75. Should it be more? Should it be less? I guess I hadn't thought about it. Should it be varied? Is it different for spending versus other groups? And I don't know if from your prior work, if you had any particular thoughts on the discussion on these 2 points. I'm sure it came up.
Well, people wanted to make it, I think we tried to get up to 150 rather than 75, but people were going back and forth on that. That's when we went into the extended town meeting, where the meeting would be held, there would be a video, and then for a week, there would be the capability for Madisonites to go in and vote at the town clerk's office, one way up or down. And that's for the town meeting only, not public hearings. Public hearings are informational and to give information back. But when it comes to an actual vote, and at the time that was a very radical thing, but I think now, after living through a year of COVID, it's maybe not so radical, to tell you the truth. Obviously, there would have to be with a note that you'd have to fund something in the budget to allow this to happen. Do you know what I mean? So there'd have to be somebody either temporary or on call after a public meeting to be able to focus just on that and assisting voters and electors to vote, depending on what it was about. So that's how we try to engage the rest of the public rather than just the special interests. And that's, no matter what is going to happen, the people who are either for something or deadly opposed are the people who are going to come out. And how do you engage that middle ground if this is your form of government? And the other question would then be, rather than that, then it's the representative town meeting, which then everybody has a say, so to speak. They have to talk to their constituents, whoever they may be.
So if I could maybe just turn the last minute or so of this part to kind of cue off from that, because I think, I want to return to sort of Matt's original point, which is whether it's an extended town meeting or we divvy the town meeting, how do we think we want the charter to tell people as to how they're going to talk to their how they're going to talk, when it comes to sort of the notices and information? And Matt, I don't know if you had any thoughts beyond the first change we made with just saying state statute, right? That solves one problem. What are the other things we want them to do by charter?
Well, I think what Lauren has put down here, I think, is what I was hoping for, either the town website or to keep it a little bit more high level than that and just say some other electronic form. Town website seems like the best channel. I don't think that you can say social media, because that could be somewhere in 5 years from now, who knows?
Right.
So I think this is appropriate, but what Joan's saying is, it really resonates with me. I mean, we might have to change the way through the charter of how Madisonites consume our town meetings. I guess what I'm stuck on, though, is how to vote and how to make that sustainable. I don't think that we have the town staff to be able to do that frequently, but not sure.
Yeah, one of the things is the actual town meetings don't happen that often and will happen less if we raise the dollar figure on, to a percentage of the budget for the special appropriation or that emergency type of thing. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the things that we were thinking about, was that we're trying to minimize the need for a town meeting, so that it's really a big event.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, we got another 200,000, we got to move out of here and do it in here. And because it's coming out of one department's budget and going into another department's budget, we have to have a town meeting for approval. We had approval of grant money. It's like even money coming in, and the use of it. So those types of things, when we had to get special equipment for the hose one, the hose one and their significant others showed up. They were the only people. It didn't hit the quorum. It was a big dollar number though, so they were worried that somebody would rally the troops and all of a sudden there'd be all these people and they wouldn't be there. So, it just happened to be one of the guys' birthdays and they all went out afterwards. But, most of the time, Joe, let's face it, unless it's a big event like, senior tax relief was a big one. We definitely got a quorum on that one. In the last conversation that we had through Zoom, that was a quorum. But we would lay odds. How many people? Is it going to be 2, 3, 10? Depending on the subject.
So, Joe, I think that there's something here. It's just that we'll need more time to spitball and figure out how to charterize it.
There's.
So I get some water. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Part of this, it seems to me, strongly so.
So maybe when we have our 15 minutes next time, and then in trio and queue up for the 2 full times that we're talking about it, and I think in those on those 2 full sessions, particularly for the one that will be on the good gravy, is that going to be the 19th or the 20th rather? I think maybe we'll probably, if it's all right with you guys, plan to run to 6:30. Because we'll have Ira Bloom doing a report on it. Why don't we kind of focus on these 2 issues? Because I think the sooner we understand at least the direction we want to go, because I think this and a couple of others are the ones that are going to dominate us. So if that being said, we're at 5:20 and we have the Board of Ed waiting. So I was going to hope then, why don't we open up to public comment to see if there's. Do we have any members of the public? See if anyone would like to say anything or ask questions of the board. So if you're here just as a member of the general public and would like to say anything, please put your hand up. Do we actually have any members of the general public, Laura?
No, you have 5 members in the attendees, and they're all people who are on your agenda.
Well, excellent. In that case,
all right.
I'd like to welcome the Board of Ed. Thank you for coming. I appreciate the fact that the one time you're not meeting on a Tuesday and you actually came to see us. So Board of Ed, particularly for those of you who haven't sat on a board, tends to hold more meetings and longer meetings than any other group in town. Do you guys want to take a second and just introduce yourselves? And Galen, if you're there, maybe your chair, do you want to start off? Katie is former chair. Do you want to start off?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. I'm Katie Stein. I've been on the board for about 6 years now.
Great.
Hi, I'm Craig Cook, new school superintendent. I've been here since December 7th, but thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Excellent. And that's everyone in our session at the moment, right? And Galen, when he appears, is the chair of that group. So I think so this is charter review. I think what we're really interested in In one sense, we talked about this a bit. In one sense, you think Board of Ed, the town can't tell you what to do anyway. But given the level of shared services, personally, I don't think that that's necessarily right. I think it's just adopting the framing. And, Craig, to be honest, you've come from another town. I'd be very curious to see if you have, facts or thoughts about how you think that the educational unit can interact with the charter for how we have it set up. I know in the last 3 months, you've obviously become an expert on everything there is in town. So that's great. If you just take care of that for us, that'd be awesome. Then we don't have much to do. So why don't we just open it up to you guys? Do you have any initial thoughts on ways you bump in? We've talked a lot about the budget process. We've talked a whole lot about the combo between Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, which is just, entertaining. But between either that or any other parts, tell us what thoughts you've got. And then I've got some questions we can talk about it.
I mean, I wish Galen, and I'm sure he stepped away for the 15 minutes that you guys were doing your work, but we had a retreat recently and there were a couple issues that clearly Galen probably took. Oh, there he is.
Oh, there he is.
Hi there, guys.
All right, go ahead, Galen. You saved me. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so we get perfect timing, although you're giving me motion sickness. We were just doing welcome. We were just doing introductions. So,
yep. Hi, everybody. I'm Galen Cawley, Katie's former sidekick, Board of Ed. So there we go.
That's also how she described you. So Galen, I was just saying that part of what we're doing is trying to get your sense from your board as to how you interact with the charter. We've talked a lot, maybe too much, about the budget process, and I threw the question open to say, do you have any initial thoughts
on the budget process? Oh goodness.
Well, no. On the charter. Usually,
yeah. Thank you. I was going to say, otherwise, how long do you have?
All night.
With the charter, I don't have any specific. I mean, as you know, we haven't interacted much with the charter in the past.
Galen, there were a couple of things that came up at our retreat that we said, that's a great question to ask the Charter Review Commission. And I think they were around referendum. But I left it up to you to take copious notes. Craig, goodness. I don't know if you remember.
The one piece that I had, and I don't have the benefit of having gone through a full year here, but in terms of, and Joe, you'd asked about my previous experience. For me, the budget referendum date for the first round is relatively later than what I'm used to. And so, like I look at and I talk to area towns. So Guilford, I believe, is late April. And so for them, if we were doing something similar, say going after the same type of new teacher that we were both proposing in the budget, they would have about a 3-week start on recruitment than we would, or planning for next year. We do a lot of planning for next year, high school scheduling, things like that, based on the budget we propose. But if that had to change or alter, or if we weren't sure if it was going to pass, I think it'd be helpful to have that information earlier. We talked about it as well, school projects and the size of them that would need to go for, town approval, but, town meeting, things like that. So that, I know you've talked about that already, about the size of that, making a percentage of budget rather than, a flat dollar amount, which holds true, into the future. In terms of my assessment, the town and board work very well together. The shared services work very well. This is my first experience with tri-boards. I had the 2 previous towns I worked in were larger, and they had a town council form of government with a town manager, and so that's what I'm more familiar with. But certainly learning, the ropes here in terms of how that works.
So would you say that town manager form worked particularly well?
I would. I always had a good relationship with the town manager. I came from Windsor, had excellent town manager, very long-term planning and commitment, I think, oftentimes is there, that there's not that constant 2-year kind of, thought about running again and things like that. So I'm very impressed with the staff here, but that I think helped maybe have a longer term view on things, in my opinion. You could plan something out over several years, and that that person was able to see that through. And but you can also see other towns that have had concerns with issues with town managers, right? I mean, it's not a not a clear cut thing. I think it depends on the person.
It's okay. I'll promptly pull you right off the spot on that one. So one question that I've got, and then I don't want to dominate all the questions, is we have a tradition of shared services, but one of my thoughts, and that works really well. So we share a finance director, we share facilities, we have staff that are combined. We have certain parts of the educational properties are actually controlled by the town. That's a tradition of shared services, and it works really well. Does any of that need to be in the charter? So suddenly the 5 of us, a group of 5 of us decide we're all going to be selectmen. We come in and we think, I hate the way this was done. Town property is town property. Good luck. It would create an immense, disruption. Is there anything about that you feel should be charterized, expressed within the charter? It's like the core assumption as to how we work, because as I look at it, it's literally that. It's an assumption, or am I just too dark?
Joe, is that for me?
I will open that to you. And,
okay.
Right. Katie says yes, so you've got it.
Okay.
No, but
I saw that. Yes, I did see that.
Yeah, that was quick. Galen was saying it too, but he was masked.
For me, I would say no. I don't think it needs to be in the charter. I think it's good management, and we have excellent people that do that. But I'll give another example. So we have a IT director who's also shared. He also does transportation and food service. That's a huge job. And so if and when he retires, that will be a hard job for us to fill. And we could ultimately look at splitting that, kind of in discussion with the town. There's the educational side of educational technology that our assistant superintendent does a lot of now. Like, that's just one example of a job where I could see shifting at some point. I think the finance works very well, again, because of the people. But, I know we've seen towns and boards, come in and out of that. I just talked to the Waterford superintendent recently. They are splitting away from sharing human resources, and he's getting a human resources director from the school side. So I think you have to be a little bit flexible. And so I would say keep it out of the charter, would be my opinion.
Katie or Galen, is there anything about our core setup that you think needs to be codified? Because Craig points out when you codify, you also ossify. So it's
right.
True.
I echo that. I think that we have a good working arrangement. If there were to be a change in sentiment, I think the normal pushback from the political process would mitigate any changes. So I don't think we need to codify those kind of shared services in the charter.
Katie?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I'm grateful that we do share services. And I think in lots of ways, particularly with the finance director, I think it is helpful in larger picture, big picture scenarios. But I think it is, codifying it in the charter could, as Craig pointed out, in the example that he gave, could be more difficult.
I don't want to hog the question, Mike. Questions or thoughts from the commission?
Yeah, so I appreciate, Dr. Cook, that you said that maybe earlier for a referendum would be better. So do you find any other, so when you do, how many presentations of your budget do you do to the various boards?
So I might ask Galen and Katie's help on a normal year, but we did, in terms of to the Board of Selectmen, we did one presentation and then answered questions on other nights. And then for the Board of Finance, the same, we're available on other, nights to answer any questions. And then going forward, I know we'll present to the public.
I think it's at least 4, probably 5.
Yeah, I think there's 2 town meetings or 2 town-wide discussions about it. One prior to going to the Board of Selectmen, and then one after the Board of Finance.
Yeah, the first one is the Board of Selectmen's budget, but you guys end up presenting there. Theory, the first selectman could do it. And then the second is the Board of Finance presenting the budget, but invariably you turn to the Board of Ed and say, eh.
Well, I know that the public hearings are necessary. Those are informational sessions and things like that. I'm just wondering if there's a way to, like, as we like to say, charterize. I love that, Joe. That's a great word. A little bit more of the process, so there's not so much redundancy, and maybe the questions can get answered, together, and then the 2 boards could potentially feed off of each other and kind of spark questions among themselves. So that's my thought. That's why I was wondering, because I know that a lot of the department heads go through the same thing. So you're considered quote unquote a department, so to speak, in this budget, even though it's 2/3 of the budget usually. So, okay, that's all. Thank you.
Alexa.
Joe, my other question, because I'm not totally, and don't take offense to all of you wonderful people who are working on the charter, but I am not as familiar as I probably should be as an elected official on the Board of Education part of the charter. Is there anything we are missing that we should be aware of in terms of how the charter affects the work that we do?
Well, it guarantees you all the $50,000 a year salary, of course. I mean, that's the first, or is that
Thank you. No, please codify that.
Yeah, exactly. The description, and Lauren, I don't know if you can have that part to come up, but it's pretty brief. If I recall, literally it says we're going to have one. And so I think the opportunity is, both to get feedback. Craig, I liked the semi-mercenary way you pointed out, the making it earlier. Like, wait a minute, I need to get a leg up on another educational district. Like, that's just going to make me happy. But is to get sort of the insights from you as to what budget and otherwise might ding a charter. Because right now I think we would look at it and say, all right, there's the budget process which dominates everything. Then there's the structure of your board. I don't know if there's anything about Board of Eds as to how they operate. I was the liaison for the Board of Ed for many years. I think you were too, Joan, weren't you? So aside from that, I don't really know very much about how you function. I don't know if other boards of ed are structured like you are, if you need to create subboards, if you need that authority. Otherwise, there's a Board of Ed and you're in the charter, you're in the budget process, and your shared services are your problem. If the Board of Selectmen cuts you off midstream,
seems so good to them.
Then you have
so
to
presumably our term limits are on there too.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think 4 years is, I mean, I know some boards are 6 years and some are less, which I can't imagine because it took me 2 years just to understand all the acronyms that they use in education and understand that language. But so I think 4 years on the rolling cycle works well for our board. Galen, I don't know if you disagree, but I presume that's in the charter.
I agree. Let's see. I'm looking at the charter right now.
You brown noser.
Yeah, we feel like book authors. Yeah. Thank you for reading.
Yeah, 6.3. Yes, it covers the 4-year terms. It works well.
And is the thank you, Lauren. So there it is. I mean, here's the the entire 3/4 of our budget, expressed in the smallest economy is very big in this.
I think that's purposeful because it really is state statute, correct me if I'm wrong, that really governs the Board of Education. So there's not a lot that can be done. And I believe this was one area where home rule does not apply. It really is state statute. So that's when we looked at, we started delving into it a few years back and we're like, okay, never mind. Yeah. But if there's something else that could, like the other impacts about how we go about the budget process and things like that is something that does impact the Board of Ed and the school system and the administrators and, that kind of thing. So there's something.
I guess the other thing that would have changed since the last board charter review was the CIP. So it's a tri-board process. I don't know to what extent you're reliant upon that process, but I'm sorry, all 3 golden doodles are barking away. But I don't know if there's anything about that process that we need to ensure your cooperation. I guess what I'm trying to get to is there's something about the assumptions that function that really are important to what you guys do that we should think about making sure continue that way? Or is everything, yeah, but maybe there's a better idea, which I think we're super sensitive to too.
I guess just for Joe, just to reframe that as well too, are there any sticking points that you have with other functions of the town? Are there things that detract from what you're doing or difficulties that you have that you'd want to address in here? I think as an observation, I think it's very important that you don't have a lot of touch points with the charter. I think Katie, like you haven't seen it, so that speaks a lot, but are there problems that you have with other boards or any other functions of town that there could be a solution here?
That is a loaded question. But no, I think I don't know the 2-year term for the Board of Selectmen. I think Craig spoke to this earlier a bit. I mean, it's when it's different from other boards, Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, or I'm sorry, Board of Education, I think it creates difficulties for long-term projects and communication and stability overall. But that's for all of you to debate. But I think the Board of Finance, was illuminated this year in our budget a little bit in terms of how that is negotiated. I think this is my first year on the board where that has been an issue in terms of how that board has determined how we spend our money. And so I think that was interesting and a great exercise, but I'm not sure it's charterizable, if that is a new phrase to be coined.
It is, and I get a royalty. So to the extent that communication or cooperation, I like the way Matt phrased this. Is there anything else that feels like a sticking point or makes your job harder, aside from outside of the budget process? Or once you guys are in your normal mode, you've got the capital improvement plan and you've got you've got the finance director that you share, and you're okay. Like maybe the framing should be outside of the budget season. Is there anything up, including disposition and purchase of property, which is currently a selectman function, right? I know that doesn't come up a lot, but it's something we talked about. Things that would help you plan for how we go forward. Oh, last thing, I'm so sorry, is also if there's anything that happened in COVID times under emergency powers or things that created a special burden or issue that otherwise would be invisible to us, I think we'd be really interested in hearing it. So I feel like we're doing like 20 questions with you guys. Like, hey, we're trying to find a thing, but we're literally trying to discover. You're a giant part of the town, and we don't want to leave you out of it. We want to make sure there's not a built-in assumption of something we should be looking at. And otherwise, we're going on with halcyon dreams of everything's fine as long as the budget passes.
I'm grateful to be included, but I'd have nothing to add.
Yeah, I would say in the day-to-day functioning, I don't think there's much to be added. CIP is valuable. Working backwards, I thought the Tri-Board Facilities Commission was very effective and a good thing for the town. There were some questions about its legitimacy, about who could call it into place and what kind of authority it ultimately had. It was a very good working group at the very least. Working, and then to come back to the last part of your question with COVID, I think the town and the school worked hand in glove with COVID because Bill McMahon in particular did such an excellent job with facilities, and Stacy as always did a great job. So I am struggling to think of anything extra that we could either request or change in the charter. I mean, I'll have to give it some more thought. But so far, so good.
Greg, are there any limitations within the power of the superintendent in Madison that you otherwise wouldn't get, or things that came up COVID-ish that you need?
I would say no for COVID. I think I came in the middle, and I thought the town
very brave of you, by the way.
The town and board did a great job of working through that, adopting policies, making adjustments. I mean, the state did a lot of providing us leeway with meetings and things like that. And then I would just reiterate too. So something I hadn't had in my previous two districts was those staggered board terms in the 4-year board terms. That is helpful. I think you always have some continuity. I always had 9 years. Everybody runs 9 members. Every member runs every 2 years. So you could have a pretty sizable changeover, 5-6 members, sometimes, and that was, that's sometimes a challenge. But I do like the 4-year staggered terms here.
Other questions from our commission?
Do you feel the number of members is the right number?
Yes.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Yes. I mean, do you know what?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Do you know what, Joan? Do you know what 2 to the 9th is? It's an ungodly number. If you have 9 members and they can vote yes or no, it's 2. Yeah, 9 is perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt.
I agree. There are some boards I know that have more than that. I can't imagine. And I think less than that, given the amount of work that it requires, would be problematic as well. And Joe, can I editorialize a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
About
you're here, and you already said you're grateful to be included, which is the line we're going to make everyone say now. So
okay. So just in terms of the town manager role, I mean, I see it a lot like our superintendent role, in that it's somebody who's trained and educated to do that role. And it works really well for the Board of Education to have a board that oversees that, but that ultimately Dr. Cook is trained to do, is trained in the educational aspects, the educational law aspects, and all of that. And I just see that personally, and I'm totally not speaking for the board, but for myself, it works really well for the Board of Education, and I could see it working well for a town if you have the right person. And we found the right person.
I'm sorry, Matt, do you have something?
No, it was actually in line with Joan's question. That's the only thing I could think of.
Excellent. Well, editorializing is welcomed. So if you have anything else to say, thoughts or things that come up after this conversation, please let Lauren or me know, because if you sort of tonight you're like, wait a minute, we should have asked for special budget referendums. And Dr. Cook, I was going to say that to the extent, if there, I don't know how superintendents chit chat, but to the extent, if there's any opportunity you have to find out if there's anything in particular within other towns that address this issue, we'll be at this for a while. So I would love to know if there's, the boards of ed or the laboratory of ideas in this context, if there's anything that people have come to or structures that we just wouldn't see because it's how we've always done things, I'd love to know what those are and we can consider them.
Sure, absolutely.
Excellent. In that case, thank you guys so much for coming. I appreciate it, and pass our thanks back to the rest of your members. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. Good night.
Good night, guys.
All right.
Excellent. That was kind of refreshing because every other, since we've largely talked about the budget, we've had boards that have told us that the other board is messing around with their budget process. This was like a happy meeting. So I thought it was interesting to hear what they had to say about their terms. Like, I thought it was a really good question. Like, are the terms right? Are they stuck? You're like, no, this is working out. I'm like, okay, check the box on that. Excellent. Well, we are oddly ahead of schedule. I was wondering.
You have one more agenda item. We have the Government Study Committee here.
Oh, thank you.
Still not looking
Please.
at the agenda items, are you?
No, I did the same thing I did last time. I ran in and turned it on and didn't open my agenda. Oh, there's Robert. Oh, good. Please. Hi.
Hey.
Let me unmute.
Excellent. How could you possibly, unmute before somebody said it? Good for you. Fast reactions.
I've done thousands of these in the last year.
So welcome to
Thank you.
We've actually, although despite the agenda item, we've taught the Government Studies Committee sort of in absentia since we first got together. So we appreciate you guys coming in. Maybe if you could just kindly do a quick second and introduce yourselves to the Charter Review Commission.
Sure. Yeah. I was chair of the Charter Revision Committee, Government Study Committee. My name is Bob Polito, been in town for about 27 years. No political experience whatsoever, and that's why I think they thought I was a good addition to the committee. And I think we have Bob Reinhardt as well.
Yep. Go ahead, Bob.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Reinhardt. I've been in Madison now, I think it's 4 years. And I was on the committee as well. So,
and Bob was integral to the committee as well. He's an excellent voice, considered, reasonable, everything you'd want in a committee member. So it was great working with him.
Thank you very much.
Well, the Charter Review Commission, you'll find is incredibly unreasonable. No. So maybe if you could talk. So we've talked a lot about your committee sort of in and around it. If you maybe could sort of talk to us about the scope of what you had and what some of your findings were and what you think we should consider as we're looking at the Charter Review Commission. That would be sure. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. We had roughly 25 meetings together, and we started pre-COVID for a few meetings, and then we had a bit of a lapse of about a month or 5 weeks, and then we jumped back into it via Zoom. And but prior to that, we had interviewed 25. We had 25 interviews with different towns. Met with the superintendent, Katie Stein, everyone we could think of that we thought would have an opinion on what was lacking in town or what could be fixed. And we went to the employees. That was very enlightening as well. And I came into this, and I think most of the members did too. I won't speak for them, but I think most of the members came into this without any premeditated, prejudged ways of government or forms of government. So we all learned about the different forms in the general statutes together.
and it was enlightening. We had 2 public forums, not well attended at all, really. I think other people were thinking about other things at the time, and we had questionnaire that went out to the town. We had questionnaires that went out to the employees as well. I talked to other employees that didn't want to talk publicly or in a group, and very, very interesting. But how we identified the issues, and then we essentially looked at it like a problem solution approach. So through all of our interviews, through all of our discussions with other people, we identified essentially 4 different issues, and they all blend kind of together. And those issues, and this is in our document. Document's about 17 pages long, with a bunch of documentation that supports all of this. We talked about voter engagement, separation of power, continuity in the town, and executive authority. And then we just hashed all of that out together. And we talked about the problems. We had problem statements. I think we had 4 of them, or 3 of them, and then talked about maybe some of the solutions for those problems. And then once we got through that, we got down to our considerations or solutions. We were going to call them recommendations, but some other committee members didn't really want to make recommendations. So we kind of massaged that a little bit and called them considerations officially. And had about 10 considerations. And it was all very, very interesting. And if you haven't read this yet, you might want to take a quick look at it. Replacing the current town meeting form of government. Okay, that just opens up a can of worms like you wouldn't believe. And then increasing the number of selectmen to ensure proper representation. Consider amending the charter to eliminate references to any political parties. We have a big issue in town with unaffiliated voters being, I believe they're now the majority of voters in town. When I got here 27 years ago, it was really a Republican town. I think it was 2-1 Republican to Democrat, I think. And I don't recall what the unaffiliated voters were. Consider establishing a town manager or a town administrator. Consider extending the term of first selectman to 4 years. I like the idea of staggering that as well for continuity. We just talked about that. Consider review all standing committees, boards, and commissions, establishing clear roles and responsibilities and reporting structures. That seems to be an issue in town. Consider establishing a role within town government that is dedicated solely to the efficient and effective communication to the electorate. Really key there. I think we do a pretty good job, especially with Everbridge now that's installed or being implemented. I think that's a great idea. You also have to want to be informed as an electorate. There's a certain responsibility that you have as a voter in town, as a resident, to want to be involved. And if you don't want to be involved, hey, that's fine. But if you want to be represented, don't complain about something that you didn't have a hand in trying to fix or change. Consider updating the code of ethics. Consider establishing an independent ethics review committee. A lot of towns have that. Consider eliminating this is a big one. Consider eliminating the practice of seating the losing candidate for first selectman onto the board. When we did our interviews with prior first select people, it was apparent that was an issue. And consider exploring possible alternatives to in-person government participation. Vote by mail, Zoom, all these other good things that we kind of take for granted, I guess. So some of that, I guess that one was fixed by itself just through COVID. So those are the ideas that we came up with. Those are the things that we noted. Bob, and I don't want to hog, so Bob Reinhardt, if anything else you want to, please feel free to jump in as well,
I will, don't worry, I know, I'm not shy.
And then, and I personally came away, I'll just give you, this is editorializing, so this is not representative of our committee. But I personally, when I was done with all of this, and probably 3/4 of the way through, I felt that we needed to change our form of government to a town manager, select person form of government. I don't have any political experience. I'm a political science major, but I don't have any political experience. But what I do have is corporate experience and military experience. And both of corporate and military has someone in charge all the time. And when someone's in charge, they're also responsible. And I think I look at the first selectman as the CEO of the town. And I look at a town manager as the COO of the town. COO operates based on what the CEO needs and desires. And the board of selectmen is essentially the board of directors of a company. They set the strategy, and they set the vigor or the pace of what's happening, and the CEO executes, and as well as the COO. That's the way I look at it. I'm not speaking for anyone but Bob. So I came away with that as a clear decision, a clear choice for me. Then again, I also like the representative town government, the RTM form. If you haven't looked at that, that's very interesting. Brantford has it, Fairfield has it. So
I was going to say, subject to my somewhat oversized puppy, popping in my lap again. It's all right. So can I ask you a question about the the town manager structure? You said you spoke to a lot of employees.
We did.
Was that their sense as well? I mean, what informed that decision, without giving up confidences, but just kind of give us your data set, because frankly, that could save us a whole bunch of time.
This goes back to August. So I believe that every single town employee I spoke with desired a town manager, and they desired it because they wanted someone in charge, and they wanted the continuity of that person in charge. And think about it. You work for somebody, and every 2 years it's potentially going to change. I think that I personally, sorry, Lauren, but I don't like that. I don't really care for that. You got enough trouble managing up to one boss who you hopefully have for a few years. So, and also other leaders in town desired the town manager as well, especially the former superintendent. I thought he wanted a person who was equal to him in town to work with. And I'm not saying what we're doing now isn't working, but could it be working better and more efficiently? And, a town manager is not cheap. It's a 150, 180 plus benefits. You're talking 2.25 all in. But I do sense that over time those costs could be retrieved with more efficient government. And again, that whole idea of town manager needs to be completely, if you were going to look at it seriously, it needs to be really, really much more researched with a lot more data sets in there as well. So that's what made me. I'm very employee oriented, kind of that servant manager type of person. And when I kept talking to the employees, it really was clear to me that go-to person needed to be there. So that's my interpretation of it. So
questions from the board?
John. So how many people, I know it's in there, do you feel as though the survey was a representative piece of the population? I know we never get 100%. We don't even get close to it.
No, I don't think it was. The survey to the town, I don't think it was representative. I think that it certainly wasn't scientific, and I did not do well in undergrad with statistics at all. I did well at graduate school in statistics, but it was like a pity grade he gave me. So, but it really didn't garner the attraction that we had hoped for. So if you had a bug about something, we think that it might have gotten your interest, and you took the questionnaire, and we did have a fair amount, Bob. I think we had about 150 or so responses.
128.
128. So you categorized them really well.
130. Yeah, 130. So.
Yeah, so something like that.
Do you know if those were unique? By the nature of your survey, are those unique responses, or could I have gone and double voted 20 times?
No, I don't think those were unique.
Yeah, it was one per IP address. So if you went on, technically, I guess you could have used a fake name and gone on a tablet and a computer.
Yeah, but now you're working at it.
Yeah. But it was designed not to allow that.
Yep. Okay. And honestly, there were some really good responses from those questionnaires. It just wasn't broad enough. It wasn't representative enough. But there were some really good ideas, really good thoughts. I don't discount what the electorate said at all. It just wasn't enough. And the town halls that we had on Zoom were not representative. We advertised, we did social media, we were in the paper. I mean, other than knocking on doors, I just don't think it was top of mind during the middle of COVID, the really rough COVID.
Yeah, I mean, that's
so.
There's really nothing else you're going to do, to break through.
Yeah. And honestly, Joe and I can tell you, it's tough getting people to public hearings and that type of thing.
In normal times.
In normal times.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. I was listening to you talk about the 75-person quorum requirement. We talked a lot about that in our group. We talked about, do you lower it? Or do you increase it? Do you, what are the pros and cons of doing both? And we hashed that out a lot too. And we didn't come up with really, any substantive arguments for or against, but we certainly think there should be a number, but what that number is, I don't think anybody knows. You don't want a small group controlling, so you got to get at least a large enough number in and of itself.
For what it's worth, and I don't know if this was resonant to your group, I'm very sensitive to the fact that we hold so many of these meetings without quorum for reasons that nobody cares about, that we desensitize. So if Peggy were to go and use her phone calls, which I think have been incredibly effective, and use them to tell people about every town meeting, everyone would hate the first selectman, because we'd get a lot of calls for things that don't matter. And to my mind, that feels like we're doing a disservice by setting a bar that doesn't offer either control or connection. That's just me, but it's the thing that bothers me about it. We can't make a big deal out of a town meeting because most of them just aren't a big deal.
But it's the only way to run the government. It's the definition of the town meeting form of government. Without a town meeting, you don't have that form of government. Therefore, you have to change the form of government.
Or at the very least, if we're having the things that require a town meeting have to be meaningful.
Yeah.
If you're going to
right, but you still have to get enough people there to show up.
Right.
And you're not going to.
So Joe, this gets me back to the town. Right. This gets me back to someone being in charge. Now, I'm not saying that Peggy's not in charge. Of course she's in charge. But someone operationally in charge that says, okay, why do I have to have a town meeting if I want to buy a truck for $50,000? Right. Give me a break. Ridiculous. I'm running this company. I'm running this corporation. You've empowered me to do this. You've elected me to do this. You've elected me via the Board of Selectmen. So the Board of Selectmen hires a town manager. So he or she's responsible back to the board. We had some people that argued, said, well, listen, if you have a town manager, you're taking away my right, or you're taking away my vote. It's just not the case. It's a silly argument. And I was not successful in defending that argument with some, but most, yes. So selectmen They're voted in, they hire, they fire, they're in charge. They're essentially a board. They're a board of I call it a board of directors. So, you know, you just give people the empowerment, let them run their business. In this instance, it's a government. You don't want to take away anyone's rights whatsoever to vote, but and they still will vote, but people need to make that leap that, you know, and I love the fact that a town manager would be professionalized, you know. So
I spoke to a friend of mine in Mansfield. Of course, they're dominated by having the university in front of them. He's been on their governmental group, and I was surprised. I didn't realize that part of their hiring process for town managers is the professional certifications. That's where they start.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Questions
now,
from other
you can get a bad one, but you can get a bad one, but you can get a bad one of anything. You know, so I heard that comment before, so I just want to address it. That's all.
It's come up in this session already. I'm sorry. Questions from the other members? Go ahead, Bob.
I wondered, in looking at representative town meetings formats, did you look at all at Greenwich?
No, we went to Fairfield and we did Brantford.
Yeah, Brantford has an RTM.
We talked to Brantford. We didn't go there because of COVID. We talked to them very unofficially. All the other towns we went to, they were actually on-site visits. It was all pre-COVID, and I heard good things about. Fairfield has had an RTM, I think, since 1947, so it's been around a long time. I don't know if Greenwich predates that, and I've heard both. But I've heard both good and bad about that, and but it intrigues me because it empowers a larger group of people who represent a larger group of people to then become their advocate and be their representative in town. We were just kind of searching for ways to get more participation in our town government, and we thought that a lot of us thought that was a great idea. And something that should be researched further, just like the town manager.
Yeah, the RTMs seem to be more like what people think we currently have, which is they vote for the selectman and the selectman runs the town. And that's not the case. That's not how the government's designed. And the RTMs seem to be, well, that's what people think it is. I'm voting for this person. They should make all the decisions for us. So you just got to kind of address that and look at how. That's the perception. And so it seems to be the closest thing we have now that could actually work. And it wouldn't take that many people.
Right. And let's be fair. You know, there's a fair amount of apathy everywhere. And on our town as well, unfortunately. And so that apathy, you know, we thought that the RTM would help that apathy or decrease the apathy in town. If things are running well, my taxes aren't going up as fast as my friend in another town. Hey, everything's great. You know, my kids are like school and everybody's happy. Why should I get involved? So we're just thinking that RTM would help people get involved. So,
I can't help but notice looking at your suggestions. I mean, most of them, not most of that. Well, yeah, probably about 6, 7 of them could be consolidated into the decision for the town manager, right? Because a lot of what I read in here is expressing concerns with it's not like concerns with the Board of Selectmen, but concerns with that structure that we've got. I did want to address something that came up in one of our conversations. It might have been the public hearing, but item 3, when you talked about removing references to political parties, I was curious whether that was a good idea from the commission or whether that appeared in your outreach. How did that go? Do you recall?
I do, and there were 2 unaffiliated voters on our little committee, and I've come to very much respect them and their opinions. And I didn't realize until I met these 2 gentlemen how important their voice was in town. But they were essentially unrepresented, because if they were going to get involved, they had to join a party, and they didn't want to join a party for whatever reason. And so that point of view, there's a lot of very, very talented people in Madison. I think the education level in Madison far exceeds some of the surrounding towns that join us. And we're
also more handsome and better looking, you know.
there's a lot of talent in that pool. How do we tap that unaffiliated voter pool? I think it's really critical that we get them to or encourage them to participate, as well as, you know, Democrats and Republicans as well. But that unaffiliated voter is someone that I think a successful person who wants to run this town successfully has to reach out to them and get their, you know, try to figure a way to get them involved in participating. So.
Bob, one other question. When you were talking with people, were any other themes coming out besides the town manager?
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely. You know, if you get a chance, get a copy of our little white paper here.
Oh, no, absolutely. I was just wondering if there was any other gems that you're picking up on that didn't make it in there.
Well, I think, you know, I think there's some low-hanging fruit here that maybe could even be changed without a charter revision. Maybe, you know, maybe going to referendum. But I think that my board, my commission, little committee believes the same, is the 2-year term is way too short. By the time you figure out what the job is as first select person, you're starting to run for the next year. And, you know, you just need continuity. The employees would like it. I think that's a really key point here is trying to have continuity within the town. You know, you start a project, next thing you know, now I'm running for office again. You know, there's so much more energy that could be spent in much more positive ways than trying to solicit funds and running for office and knocking on doors. I mean, that's got to be, I never want to do it. It's got to be a horrible thing to do. But
the one other thing that did come up that we really didn't capture was the, at times, contentious relationship between the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen.
Good point.
Oh, is there one?
We haven't noticed that.
Yeah, I'm sure you haven't.
Yeah.
But I think that was one of the other issues as well. But it was just a little tough to tackle in the short time we had.
Right. Yeah.
But the other thing too is, Joe, you mentioned that you thought these could all be rolled up into a town manager, and I would disagree.
Yeah, not all of them.
Yeah. And the town manager is just a way of, I mean, when we really started looking at this, we broke things down into just a couple of themes. One of the themes was continuity or lack of continuity. And I think I may have offended someone at one point when I talked about the Madison strategic plan, which is a list of about 28 different things we want to do over the next couple of years. It's not really a strategic plan, it's a list of wishes.
Priorities. And
then if you look at Liberty School and Academy, nothing's been done on those. Downtown, things don't get done because people leave after 2 years. And you need someone who's good continuity. So for me, the biggest thing out of this, in listening to everybody and just thinking about it, the two things were continuity, which is essentially a town manager helps that. They're an employee of the town. The town manager, longer terms for the elected officials, make it staggered, so it makes life a little easier.
Right.
And really that's kind of gets to the point of it. If you can do that, if you can get this kind of continuity going, you get a little more effective government. So, you know,
Clinton just went to a town manager about a year or two ago, and you know, they're a case study. You're watching it as it happens, and they've, I'm told, significantly improved their efficiency within the town government. because they had I guess, a very, very tough time. 9 referendums for their budget prior to getting the town manager. I mean, I can't imagine the inefficiencies and all of that. And I'm not saying run the government like a business by any stretch in my prior comments, but there's some good things that you can take out of business and add it to how to help run a government, that I've seen as a business person that, could be successful. So.
One other thing I just thought of too is that we did talk to a couple of people who were on the previous Charter Review Commission, and
right.
Their counsel was, don't try to change too much because it'll get voted down. Yep. So be very careful in how you craft what you want. That's goes against everything I believe in, but that was the advice we were given.
One of the first missions of this happy group was to realize that there had been a misassumption into how the votes could be proposed. So we can propose certain items as a completely separate agenda item, which I think is helpful. And
so you can separate. That'd be great. Then you have a better chance.
Yeah. Bob's
a lot
right.
Of small things a lot of small inconsistencies in the charter that just need to be cleaned up. And no one's going to care about that.
I appreciate the fact you made reference to the sentence that goes nowhere. So well done for the.
There's also a position created that's never actually created.
Right.
Which one is it? Something like a town manager, I think, but
town administrator.
Town administrator, that's right.
Yeah. So that can be done now. It's in the charter. That could be hired now. It's an administrator, but not a manager. And there's a big distinction between what a manager does and what an administrator does. So.
And I think that it doesn't need to be in the charter for that position to be there. There's not a position that says we need a director of finance. There's not a position that says we have a risk manager. I think that if we're going to go for the town manager, that has a connotation to it, I think, versus a chief, just a chief operating officer or something like that.
So that's true. One thing is the town manager was the one topic that split the commission pretty much in half.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We could not get reasonable agreement.
Right.
That was why when we did the last charter, we did not call it a town manager. We called it a chief operating officer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah.
It's all semantics. Someone's in charge.
Someone in charge
needs to be in charge. Exactly.
I was wondering if oh, I'm sorry. Any other questions before I go and hog the mic and ask my next one? Could you just talk a little bit more about, because we've been talking a bit about this, the eliminating the practice of seating the losing candidate for first selectman onto the board. Because I personally became a selectman because a losing selectman seated, and then 2 months later thought, ugh, and then I came in. That was my first entree onto the board of selectmen. On the other hand, I can see why, hey, if someone's a losing first selectman, but they want to stay active, you want to keep that person. On the other hand, there have been times where it creates weirdness. So it seems to roll both ways. I was curious how your discussion went on it. I personally don't have a sense as to which way that should go.
Yeah. I got the sense in talking with the past first selectman that having the losing person on creates some animosity. There's some lack of willingness to cooperate, lack of willingness to just be, to work with the other side. And I get that. That's human nature. But you also have the people that elected you. You have to work. You have to get along, and you have to negotiate and agree. And I just think I agree with them. I agree with this one particular first selectman who almost got upset when he was talking to us about how difficult it was in working with others. So but then again, do you want someone, if you go by how many votes were cast and who got the majority and who got the second majority or the second most, that's the will of the people. The will of the people matters. obviously. That needs to be said, but it does make it for inefficient. But then having that losing person on there does have some accountability added to the overall board, because the accountability, you know, it's just not, you don't want a rubber stamp by any stretch. You want reasonable people working with each other for the people. So, but I can see that working out for the betterment of the town if that did get implemented. So,
yeah, I can recall examples where it seemed to be a perfectly fine thing that it worked out that way, and I can call examples where, you know, it created a little bit of disruption. So just a reminder for those of you that haven't been through it, if in an uncontested election, except for first selectman, 6 people run, 2 for first selectman and the others just run for their seat, but it's the top 5 vote getters that become the board of selectmen. So in a close race, then the losing first selectman typically has enough votes to bump the next person. Not always, but it's happened a couple of times in recent memory, as I think we talked about a couple of sessions ago.
Yep. And actually it has bumped pretty much every time. But when it has been contested in the last 20 years. So there's been people that have been on the boards that were who were part of the majority. And then the first selectman lost the majority but was still on the board. So one of the other members had to leave. I personally lost, but stayed on the board of selectmen. I had enough votes to be on the board of selectmen. So it was,
that, Joan.
Yeah. Personally, you know, from the other side of it, I want to be on the board of selectmen. I don't want to have to not be on the board of selectmen because someone feels as though, you know, it brings a levity where I lost by 300 votes. That's very tight. So therefore there's some power to that.
And who are we to, not to interrupt you, but I'm sorry, but who are we to say the will of the people have voted for you and you shouldn't be seated? That's a big ask.
Right. So I would have to say I would disagree with I think the top 5, and if the person wants to be, if the losing first selectman wants to relinquish prior to being seated, we can add that language in. So it's their option to say, no, I'm not going to be seated.
Which it is currently.
No, it's not. You've got to be seated first and then you have to resign.
So, okay.
So that's the thing. They seat for a few months and then they resign. So
yeah. So
I stayed on for a while.
Because one of the other things, it's a very different decision if you want new people to come and be involved in the board of selectmen. To the extent we have a 2-party system, you would have to go to the existing selectmen and primary and bump them if you want new people to get involved. Otherwise, usually, frankly, the town hunts for people to run for first selectman. It's a limited, it's hard to run for the job. The conditions under which one wins and accepts it are very self-selected. But it's a way that new people come in, because they come, if they lose, they sit on the board, but then the board has, you know, new blood for people that received a lot of votes. I will keeping an eye on the clock. Go ahead, please.
No, you just spurred something in my mind. We talked about even trying to attract first select people to run with maybe higher comp. And conversely, if we did do something as a town manager, that first selectman comp would go down and help pay for the town manager spot. So town manager, first selectman right now gets roughly what, 100 grand, something like that.
Yeah,
not a lot of money. I mean, if Peggy knew what she was getting into in 19 and going through COVID, she deserves. Anyone would deserve so much more money for what she's done for the town, and anybody in that role.
That increase was very controversial. We did that when I was in the board of finance, just trying to draw more people, and I wanted to go to 150, and I couldn't get people up there. But even that level was quite controversial. So But I agree.
So this leads to another point we talked about as well, is you want somebody to run for first select person. You're going to give them 100 grand. Who's going to take that? Who's going to take 100 grand in this town? Who wants 100 grand in this town? So you're going to get somebody who's retiring or retired, or you're not going to get probably the cream of the crop of the people that you want to help run the town in that role. So, or unless they're independently wealthy, you're just not gonna find that. So Peggy must be independently wealthy. I don't know.
She's powered by dedication.
She was a stay-at-home mom at the time that she started.
Yeah. No, we've talked. So
yeah. So, but our crop of stay-at-home moms that are looking to re-enter the workplace with Wharton degrees is somewhat limited.
Yes.
Yeah. But they're out there.
They're out there. We found them.
So watching the clock, I just wanted to ask the commission if there are any other questions for the government studies group. Otherwise, I can't thank you enough for coming to talk to us.
Yeah, just one reflection on what Bob had said too. Just the amount of unaffiliated voters that we have here. It's something that we should take into consideration. I think there's a lot that's out of the scope of what we're trying to do. But that's very important to recognize. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and that bothered me because I didn't realize how big of a deal that was until I talked to these two gentlemen that were on our little committee. And if there's anything that we can do for you in the future, please feel free to reach out directly if you'd like. Reach out to Bob, any other committee member. I was hoping we'd get more on there than there's lots of other things going on right now, but we're more than happy to chat with you. You want to use this as a sounding board, you want to have a spirited, friendly argument on different things, we're more than happy to help you with that. Okay. So please don't think that this is one and done, and happy to help out whenever we need to.
Well, I
thank
have
you
to
for
tell
coming. Appreciate
it. Given the extent
pleasure.
of people that you've spoken to, you could really save us an awful lot of work and orientation. So I really appreciate you coming today, and we'd love to hear from you more. And if you get anything like, oh, wait a minute, I should have, please come to a meeting.
Sure.
Whether it's public or let Lauren know, or give me an email. I'm happy to agenda space you right in.
I just wish we could do this in person. It's as good as this is. I just wish we could do it together. So. Anyway, maybe we can
hopefully soon.
Summertime. Yeah. Great. Well, have a great
Excellent.
night. And Bob Reinhardt, thank you for getting on. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. Talk to you guys later.
Care.
Sure. Thank you so much to the both of you for coming.
Guys.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye. So Matt, I think we have I had something canoodling around in my head about the appointed boards and commissions that I think we can try to bring in more use that way. So I want to present that when we get to that section.
Okay.
I'm still kind of fleshing out some thoughts, but as far as elected boards, that's tough. We are in a two-party system. So but I think the appointed and
Well, I think there are two questions though. There's a two-party system, and on the other hand, the question is, why does the charter have to deal with it? I mean, they bring up an interesting point about de-charterizing political parties. We may still use it, but there's no particular, we should consider that. Like, does it need to be built into the charter itself?
Some of us would fight very hard to keep it there, to have representation involving not just one party.
There are minority representation rules controlled by the state of Connecticut, so you can't suddenly end up with that. I'm so sorry. That's not sort of the issue on the table.
Okay.
The issue really is about what are the pathways to engagement for the board.
Yes, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
We certainly need to have open the door to unaffiliated folks, of course.
But the thing is, I think that there's a struggle if we do charterize something. I want it to be as fair as possible, so that there's a known understanding of how the process would work, which is some of the stuff I'm working on now. Having been through appointing people and now searching to appoint people.
Right.
I've had a couple of hats on here. So, but I think that in seeing where things have gone well and things have not gone well, when there is a change of power. And I think we need to look at that, how things should occur. There's with the victor comes the spoils. And in this case, that's usually the appointments to the boards and commissions. So I think we can look at this and make it less political by potentially codifying something that is neutral.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whoever wins gets this, and whoever, and these are the types of things. So that's my goal on that piece. So
I like that, because I think we need to be more inclusive and to have that in there for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. I think to the extent that our mantra is, what do we do so it expands access and ease for people to get involved, then that's great. And if we're doing it, we realize if we, that the political parties serve a function that can't, replace some piece, fine. But I think in general, we should make it the mission of, like, the idea of having a third path for appointments feels like a charterizable thing, and maybe that should be the only path, or the idea of appointing a group that goes and hunts for appointments. Political parties can report to that group if they want or not, but that way we have a group dedicated just to find people.
That's tough unto itself, though.
Right. Well,
so there's an issue, like, then who's appointing that appointed board that's looking to do it, and how do you do
and then
the
immediately
midterm
we would want to split it by party, and
it comes out to be political on time. So
it could be our new ethics board.
Yeah.
So
what I'll do is I'm finishing it up. I'll send it to Lauren to distribute to the group, to kind of just some thoughts to kind of jump off from.
So just to remind for our next couple of meetings. So next meeting, if you recall, last time I said I spoke to Dave Anderson. He's talked to all the land use chairs. One of the things, by the way, if I could, one of the things that really resonated with me that Bob Reinhardt said was the need for consistency. Not to sing my own personal favorite song, but the town is highly threatened by storm surge, sea level rise, and the increasing weather instability. And those solutions play out over a very long period of time. So to a certain extent, we can talk with also the land use boards about this and about resilience. So we'll see what comes up for our discussion. So I think one thing, Lauren, I'm wondering if we shouldn't, if to the extent that they're the only item on our agenda for, aside from minutes and going through document review. I'm wondering if we shouldn't change up next time and start with the land use board, and when that discussion ends, then pick up document review, because we might get a longer period. The 15-minute block I don't sense is working too well, because we've got more stuff to say. We should do land use, maybe book them in for say 20-ish minutes. And if that conversation's cooking, then we'll just keep going, and then pick up document review. Then we can just talk about it, and we might end up with a little more continuity.
Can we possibly get away from the weekly meetings?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, Laura. I'm sorry, Joan. So we'll do land use. Then we're going to take a week off, and then I was proposing 2 weeks of just document review, just with us chickens. So we would bring in Ira. If you recall, we sent him with a mission to take a look at things. And then the meeting after that, we would also just be among ourselves and just go through the document. And then we would see where we are from that. Because one of the things we could consider at that point in time is either do we form a couple of subcommittees? Once we've been through it all, do we want to send part of it away for revamping and then consider it when it's ready, and revisit at that time?
Well, the concern I've got is even subcommittees, we're going to need a representative, and we're going to need to, I just feel like if we could do, like, we're going the 6th, we're skipping the 13th. Can we go the 20th and then go the 4th of May, then skip the 11th and then go to the 8th? Just do it every other week to try to call back. I will form to the will of the group. My one thought would be that, so 6,
I wouldn't mind doing the 20th and 27th. First, I know people have a lot of obligations normally the first week of May. But I wouldn't mind doing the 20th and 27th back to back, because I'd love us to remember and have continuity and actually go start at the beginning and get to the end of some of our thoughts of what I keep calling the Lauren comments, and like be able to even consider voting on those.
I just don't think we're going to get through, even in 3 hours, all of those pieces. I mean, I'm just concerned. It's a lot to do weekly for me. And I don't know if it is for anybody else, but I have multiple meetings every week, both business and other stuff, community things. And, I'm going to be kicking up soon with Night Hand. So, that's going to be a hell.
No good deed goes unpunished, Joan.
Yeah. So I'm trying to be reasonable. I did not realize the last time we did the charter review, it was, I don't believe it was weekly. And it may have been for a couple of times, but then we kind of broke out. Whatever you want to do. But I know that I'm off May 11th. I'm not going to be here, and I'm not zooming in from Hawaii. Sorry.
Yeah, you're actually making that to Hawaii. Good for you. So we will then move charter review to Hawaii on May 11th. We can agree with that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I still won't be there.
Yes. I'm fine to do. I have us sort of clocked out 3 weeks ahead, right? So I've got the 6th. We have a week off, and then I want to continue that conversation, and I was bringing Ira in because he had part of his review. But I view that very much the same line of conversation we have. I'm happy to think about the if you want to move it to every other week or something along like that, they would bring it to, or if we wanted to look at the 27th and then take 2 weeks off, it's fine with me. My hope is that we could actually have some continuity to make this first pass so that we're done, and then think about policy discussions for some of the other issues. That's my sort of simplistic thinking. I'd like to.
I could see doing every other week. I hear your point, Joe, about the continuity, especially with the things coming up. But I think if we had some homework assignments and we actually came with ideas that were fully formed to put out, as opposed to spitballing as we go, it'd probably be much more efficient for us to make some ground.
So why don't we do that then? Why don't we end the 20th? So let's hear what Ira has to say. He's the last inbound communication that I've got scheduled. Right, we've now done all the major boards.
Under fire.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we did go through a lot of BOF conversation. So we have other groups we should talk to. We should certainly reach out to. I'd like to reach out to the public safety groups. I'd like to talk to some of the NGOs, but I really feel that the need to do the document work is next. Like, we've hit some of the big structural issues. Yeah, I would be perfectly, from my perspective, sure, why not? We had broken up before by issue. We could break up before by section in a couple of groups. Maybe then one thing to think about is take a look at, even for our next meeting, take a look at the sections themselves and see if there are any ones that you really feel invested in personally. And maybe we could even divide up into a couple of groups. Like, all right, I really have my passion for section 4. Bob is dug in on section 2. Go through and see if there are sections that really sort of light you up, and maybe we can break it up for presentation and recommendation. I like that. Kind of a better version of the reading group that we did initially. So, Lauren, why don't we leave a little time in the agenda for next week so we'll do land use and we'll do document, but include as an agenda item meeting schedule and report outs. And
how long is next week's meeting scheduled?
So I am going to be, I don't really know. I would anticipate that the land use boards will be relatively quick. I might be surprised because of climate resilience questions, and there's a statute in front of in front of the legislature, a bill in front of the legislature expanding flood and erosion control boards to become resilience boards that may have a charter impact. I mean, I don't know if we're going to get any of that. Could be we'll get Dave Anderson, who has a unique perspective, and he'll talk to us for 10 minutes. If that's the case, I think we should be able to finish correctly on time at 6. Sorry, we're running a little late today. This class, sorry.
Literally.
We're going to start calling you professor.
Don't.
From now on, you're professor.
You know, but you know, I would hope that we would be in the 6-ish range. So
that sounds good.
All right,
okay.
so we are running late. So why don't we disperse? Do we have anyone from the public, Lauren? I thought we had somebody sitting there for a bit.
Yeah.
Jen Gordon.
Yeah.
Jen, would you like to come and
Hi,
make
Jen.
a comment and ask a question?
She's downstairs. I'll stop on the floor.
Seriously, we can hear her from downstairs. Like, this is so boring.
Yeah.
Come on, let's eat. Let's get dinner.
Exactly. That's what she's doing. She's figuring out when to drop pasta. All right. In that case, can I have, barring any objection, can we adjourn?
We can adjourn.
All in favor?
Yeah.
All right. I'll see you
Thank
next
you.
time.
Good work, guys.
Hey, good work.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Your
Bye.
See you guys.
Great.